Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back in time to the one place more dangerous than your Aunt Linda's holiday group chat, medieval Europe. But not just any life. Tonight, you're about to spend 24 hours as a medieval woman. If you thought your worst Monday was bad, try surviving when your job description is birth machine, laundry wrangler, livestock enthusiast, and part-time scapegoat, all rolled into one under a single lumpy wool dress. So before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, put a fan on for that cozy background hum, and get comfortable. Let's get curious for a second. Have you ever wondered what it was actually like to be a woman in the Middle Ages? Did anyone survive puberty, childbirth, or the local rumour mill? Was spa day just code for not dying while bathing in a pond? Would you last a week in a world where your shampoo was also your soup, your doctor was also your barber, and your neighbours were all technically armed? Could you handle marriage by age 12, childbirth by 14, and menopause if you were lucky? Would you end up a respected matron, a forgotten ghost, or the star of a witch trial just for knowing what a carrot is? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1325. You're barefoot, underdressed, underappreciated, and possibly already late for something. Let's see how long you can last. You burst onto the scene not with a royal trumpet, but a resigned sigh from the midwife. In the medieval lottery of life, being born a girl is like rolling snake eyes. Your job is set, your future is pre-written, and everyone's first reaction is to count your fingers and toes, then immediately start planning your dowry. The best toys? Whatever you can borrow from a goat. The world you're born into is, to put it delicately, rustic. Forget nursery murals and matching pastel onesies. Your crib is a pile of old straw in a smoky room. The family dog your honorary blanket, and the mobile dangling over your head is probably just a spider web with last summer's flies. The midwife gives you a quick inspection, 2 eyes, 10 toes, still breathing, and, let's check, yes, definitely a girl. She exchanges a look with your mother that says, better luck next time. If you're the 3rd or 4th daughter in a row, you might even catch a hint of panic. Your name is decided with little ceremony, usually after a saint or a neighbour's cousin. Nobody's aiming for originality here. If you're lucky, you get a name that doesn't rhyme with pestilence. Your christening is less about faith and more about survival. Everyone rushes to get you baptized before anything can go wrong, because infant mortality is high enough to keep the priest busy and the family perpetually anxious. Statistically, the first big question of your life is not who will she become, but will she make it to spring? From the moment you open your eyes, your daily soundtrack is a blend of livestock, church bells, and your siblings fighting over the least crusty bread crust. If you're crying, it's not because you're hungry, it's because there's a chicken sitting on your foot and nobody has time to notice. In a world where warmth is a luxury and baths are a legend, childhood is something you survive more than enjoy. Your wardrobe? A tiny, itchy version of whatever your oldest sister has outgrown. Usually brown, always scratchy, and decorated with mysterious stains that nobody investigates. Shoes are reserved for feast days or when you need to impress the neighbour's goat. Your favourite playthings are the odd smooth rock, a doll made from rags and wishful thinking. Or, if you're lucky, a stick that hasn't already been claimed for firewood. If you want to play house, congratulations. You actually get to help clean it. Playtime and chores are basically the same thing, just with more supervision. Education starts early and ends quickly. You're not handed a picture book. You're handed a broom. Your first lessons are in sweeping floors, shushing siblings, and learning not to talk back to anyone who can legally sell you into marriage. Most of what you learn comes from watching, copying, and trying not to get trampled by a pig on laundry day. Reading and writing are for nuns and the nobility. If you can recite the Lord's Prayer and keep the fire going, you're already ahead of the curve. Sickness is an ever-present threat. Every cough could be your last, and every fever is treated with prayers, cold water, and the medicinal properties of whatever someone found growing behind the outhouse. There's no pediatrician on call, just hope, holy water, and maybe a pinch of luck. If you make it past the age of 5, everyone breathes a sigh of relief and immediately expects you to help haul water from the well. The truth is, being born a girl in medieval Europe means your dreams are not your own. Your future is arranged before you can walk, your value measured in cows, and your first birthday cake is just yesterday's bread with extra crumbs. But if you manage to survive, laugh, and carve out a moment of fun in the dust, you're already winning the hardest game of all, medieval childhood. If you thought being a modern kid meant doing chores, you might want to take a deep, grateful breath before we step into your medieval shoes, assuming you're wearing any. Childhood in the Middle Ages is less about sugar and spice, more about scrubbing and survival. The moment you can toddle without falling directly into the fireplace, you're promoted to unpaid household staff. Your job description is simple. Everything nobody else wants to do. The day begins early. Sunlight barely seeps through the hole in your wall that's pretending to be a window. And before you can yawn, someone is already nudging you awake with the business end of a wooden spoon. There's no 5 more minutes, no gentle good morning, just a brisk, get up, there's work to do, and the sound of someone spilling something you'll inevitably have to clean up. Welcome to your first team-building exercise. Morning chores, medieval style. Let's talk about water. Modern kids might complain about emptying the dishwasher. You're expected to haul water from the nearest well or river. The bucket is almost as big as you are, and somehow it gets heavier the closer you get to home. Lose a drop? No one's impressed. Spill half? Time to go back. On the plus side, you quickly develop biceps that would make a gym influencer jealous. On the minus side, you'll spend your evenings picking splinters out of your hands and probably develop a permanent stoop by puberty. After the water comes the sweeping, not with a lightweight ergonomic broom, but with a bundle of twigs tied together with whatever passed for rope before twine was invented. You sweep out dirt, then sweep in more dirt, because when your floor is made of mud, clean is a relative term. Dust, that's just seasoning for the next meal. If you're lucky, your sweeping uncovers a lost crust of bread, or at least startles the family chicken into relocating her business outside. But your responsibilities don't end at the threshold. Medieval villages run on the energy of small, terrified children sent out to gather firewood, herbs, eggs, and, on a good day, the neighbor's missing pig. You learn early that you're considered more expendable than an adult. If there's something sharp, slimy, or mildly dangerous, congratulations, you get first dibs. Foraging for mushrooms? Sure, but make sure you know which ones are food and which ones make you see the Virgin Mary tap dancing on a goose. In the barnyard, your job is simple. Don't get kicked. You're expected to milk goats, chase ducks, and coax eggs out of hens who have strong opinions about sharing. All the while, you keep one eye on the livestock and another on your siblings, whose favorite hobby is trying to convince you to switch chores so they can nap in the hayloft. Sibling rivalry is less about screen time, more about who gets the least disgusting job. If you're lucky, you'll turn the spit at the fire and only get singed twice a week. As a medieval girl, your training is gendered from day one. Boys learn to use the plow and handle tools. Girls get a crash course in spinning, sewing, and the delicate art of not spilling hot soup in a crowded hut. By age 6, you've probably mastered the spinning wheel, the needle, and at least 3 different ways to mend a sock with a hole the size of your foot. If you're slow or clumsy, there's no patience. There's just a lot of loud sighing, some muttered prayers for your future husband, and a stern lecture about not embarrassing the family at the next feast day. Meals are only restful if you mistake chewing for rest. You help prepare, serve, and clean up afterward. Your reward is a hunk of bread and a chance to scrape the pot, which is the medieval equivalent of licking the cake batter bowl. minus the sweetness, and plus the possibility of eating yesterday's burnt turnip. By sundown, your hair smells like smoke. Your hands are raw, and you've managed to avoid only half the daily disasters. But in the rare moment when you and your fellow tiny laborers collapse outside, passing a bit of gossip and a piece of hard cheese, there's a spark of joy, a victory snatched from a day of servitude. Childhood in medieval times may be short on leisure, but it's long on survival, sibling alliances, and the knowledge that you've pulled your weight, even if your feet never quite left the ground. Life as a medieval girl is a full-contact sport, and not just because of the goats. Every morning you wake up is a minor miracle. Survival is not guaranteed, especially when you consider that in the Middle Ages, childhood is basically an extreme obstacle course built by germs, accidents, and the entire caste of the local microbe population. If you're feeling dramatic, you could call it the Hunger Games, medieval edition. Except with more turnips and far less hope. Let's start with the basics. Germs are everywhere. No one knows about bacteria or viruses yet, but trust me, they know something is out to get them. Every surface is a mystery film, every breath is a gamble, and you don't have the luxury of hand sanitizer or a mom who's a little too into essential oils. The best medical technology available to your parents is pray and hope it goes away on its own. If that doesn't work, there's always a neighbor who knows a lady who swears by leeches. Common childhood illnesses aren't just common, they're expected. Fevers sweep through the village faster than gossip. If someone sneezes at breakfast, you can bet half the household will be hacking by lunch. Measles, smallpox, whooping cough, and mysterious medieval ague, all these are just part of the soundtrack of your youth, right next to the rooster and the sound of your siblings arguing about who gets the least lumpy side of the straw bed. Even the common cold is a heavyweight contender. Catch a sniffle in February and you might be down for the count by March. If you're feeling under the weather, don't expect to lounge around with a cozy blanket and a binge-worthy Netflix queue. Sick days are just days. You're still expected to fetch water, sweep floors, and only cough when no one is looking. Rest is a privilege reserved for people who aren't needed in the field or kitchen. Parents are sympathetic in their own brisk way. Oh, you have a fever? Well, keep stirring the pot, it'll sweat it out. And the cure's on offer? Best not to ask too many questions. The local healer's bag of tricks is a wild grab bag. Onion poultices for chest pain. Garlic necklaces for warding off evil spirits. And friends. And, if things get really desperate, a prayer marathon complete with bonus splashes of holy water. If your symptoms persist, it's time to call in the barber surgeon, who may offer to bleed you for balance or slap on a homemade plaster that smells suspiciously like disappointment. The phrase "this might sting a little" takes on new meaning when the tools haven't been washed since last year's harvest festival. It's not just illness that's out to get you. Injury is never more than one slippery stone, angry pig, or unstable thatched roof away. There are no child-proof locks, no safety rails. And the only thing standing between you and disaster is your own sense of self-preservation, which, as a child, is famously underdeveloped. Break a bone, if you're lucky, someone will splint it with sticks. If not, you just develop a new way of walking and become that one kid with the funny limp. Malnutrition is another daily challenge. Food is neither plentiful nor varied. You eat what you're given, and if you're picky, you're out of luck. Turnips, onions, beans, and the ever-present pottage are your staples. Meat is rare, fruit is seasonal and mostly reserved for people who can pronounce inheritance. A weak immune system is just part of the package. If you manage to grow tall, you're practically a local legend. Let's not forget parasites. Lice, fleas, and worms consider you part of the family. Scratching your scalp is a group activity. The family comb is passed around like a holy relic, though sometimes, honestly, you'd prefer the lice. But somehow, through all the fevers, aches, coughs, and questionable medical experiments, a few lucky children do survive. If you make it to age 5, you've passed the medieval version of a final exam. If you reach adolescence, you're practically indestructible. By now, you're scarred, scrappy, and wise enough to duck when someone starts sneezing. And you've definitely earned your spot in the annals of the family, living proof that surviving childhood in the Middle Ages isn't just luck, it's a superpower. In the medieval world, education is a word used mostly by monks, and occasionally by rich uncles who've run out of hobbies. If you're a girl born to a regular family, your odds of attending school are right up there with your odds of discovering indoor plumbing. Not zero, but definitely worth lighting a candle for. The main curriculum is simple: obedience, silence, and whatever chores the adults can dream up before breakfast. Your first classroom is your own home, and your teacher is whoever happens to be loudest at any given moment. Lessons start early, sometimes before you can walk, and they don't stop until you're old enough to be handed off to a husband or the local nunnery. Forget math. The only numbers you really need to know are: how many eggs did the chickens lay? And how many of my siblings can I blame for breaking the spinning wheel? Arithmetic is strictly practical. Enough to count loaves, measure out beans, or barter with a neighbor, without getting shortchanged. Geometry is reserved for figuring out how to fit 10 people on one straw mattress without ending up next to the goat. Reading and writing? You've heard of them, but they're like unicorns, magical, rumored, and only seen by a lucky few. Most families can't read, and there's little use for letters when your life is organized by sunrise, the church bell, and the unmistakable sound of your mother's sigh. The village priest is probably the only person who owns a book, and he guards it like it's made of gold and confessions. Your only hope of learning to read is to catch the eye of a kindly priest, or have an older sibling who is unusually curious, or perhaps just unusually indoorsy. For noble girls, education is slightly fancier. If you're born into a wealthy family, you might get a governess, a stern woman with strong opinions on posture and even stronger opinions on your future. She'll teach you to embroider, recite prayers in Latin, and maybe how to sign your name with a flourish that says, "I'm literate, but only just." You might learn to play the lute or the recorder, but don't get too excited. Music is mostly a way to keep your hands busy and your mouth shut. No one is asking for your TED Talk. If you're sent to a convent, you'll get a crash course in everything holy and quiet. Nuns are the real scholars, reading, writing, copying manuscripts, and occasionally sneaking in an extra piece of bread. Your education will involve strict schedules, endless prayers, and the ability to sleep through bells at all hours. But at least you'll learn Latin, which is great if you ever need to decode your own tombstone. Back in the village, your syllabus is mostly oral tradition. Your mother teaches you how to tell good herbs from deadly ones, how to turn scraps into dinner, and how to pretend you didn't see anything when the Lord's men ride through town. Your grandmother shows you how to spin, weave, patch, and sew, skills that are your ticket to respectability and, more importantly, survival. Storytelling is the one subject where everyone shines. At night, by the fire, tales are told and retold, legends of saints, family scandals, and what really happened to that chicken last spring. Most importantly, you learn how to listen, nod, and remember your place. Medieval society loves a girl who knows how to keep her head down and her opinions to herself. Speaking out of turn is a fast track to extra chores, or, if you're unlucky, a visit to the priest for a lecture on humility. Tests? They're daily, and mostly pass divided by fail. If you can recite the Lord's Prayer without mumbling, keep the bread from burning, and avoid open rebellion, congratulations, you're at the top of your class. In the end, Medieval education for girls isn't about opening doors. It's about surviving in a world determined to keep most of them firmly shut. Still, you pick up wisdom in the unlikeliest places. A whispered joke, a grandmother's warning, or the satisfying thwack of successfully swatting a fly mid-sermon. You might not graduate, but you do learn. And in your world, that's the only diploma that counts. So, you've survived your earliest years, dodged every childhood illness, and managed to stay on the right side of the family goose. Just as you start to get the hang of chores and maybe even enjoy an evening of spinning wool by the hearth, something ominous is in the air. Your 12th birthday is fast approaching, which in the medieval world means one thing. You're about to be launched headfirst into the marriage market, ready or not. And trust me, no one is ever ready. Marriage for a medieval girl isn't about romance or candlelit dinners. It's a practical arrangement, more livestock auction than fairy tale. From the moment you're born, someone, somewhere, is already sizing up your potential for an alliance. It might be your father, who spent the last decade subtly comparing you to the neighbor's daughters, or your mother, who dreams of a dowry big enough to finally buy a second-hand cow. Either way, you're the family's most negotiable asset. If you're from a peasant family, the choices are simple and brutally honest. Suitors are chosen based on proximity, reputation, and whether their family owns a pig. If you're lucky, you'll get someone with most of his teeth and only a mild case of chronic grumpiness. Your own feelings about the matter are not considered, unless you happen to be the only girl in town and the local lord's son has suspiciously low standards. Love? That's a luxury item, usually imported at great expense from somewhere far, far away. For noble girls, the stakes are even higher and the rules even stranger. Your parents have spent years cultivating alliances, eyeing land boundaries, and gossiping about whose uncle accidentally insulted the king at last year's feast. A match can be arranged before you even learn to tie your shoes, and you might meet your future husband for the first time at the wedding itself. He could be 12, he could be 42, he could be on his third wife. The only thing guaranteed is a signed contract and a lot of nervous speculation about heirs. The big day is announced not with fanfare, but with the hasty gathering of relatives and the smell of nervous bread baking. Your trousseau, a collection of your family's finest linens, a wooden spoon, and a small herd of suspiciously underfed chickens, is packed up. You try not to cry, because tears are expensive and someone is bound to accuse you of being ungrateful. Instead, you accept congratulations from neighbors who can barely disguise their relief that it's not their daughter's turn. As you stand in your wedding dress, usually your cleanest tunic, maybe with a borrowed scarf, you listen to the priest talk about obedience, loyalty, and the many, many children you're expected to produce. Rings are a possibility, but only if someone remembered to bring one. More often, there's just a handshake, a muttered prayer, and the sudden realization that you now belong to a man you've barely spoken to. He looks nervous. You look nervous. Even the chickens look nervous. What follows is less a honeymoon and more an extended orientation into your new family's unique brand of dysfunction. Your mother-in-law is the real power here, and her first lesson is simple. Don't touch anything, and stay out of the good cupboard. The local women size you up, the neighbors' boys make jokes, and the old men in the corner shake their heads in a way that suggests they've seen it all before. And maybe they have. Your new life as a married woman begins with work. There's always more to do. Cooking, cleaning, carrying, and, if you're especially unlucky, immediate motherhood. There are no breaks, no grace period, and definitely no marital counseling. If you're lucky, your new husband will be gentle. Your new home will be standing. And you'll get through the first week without accidentally poisoning anyone at dinner. In the medieval marriage market, you're not a shopper, you're the merchandise. And as you settle into your new role, you realize that surviving the wedding was just the beginning. The real adventure starts now, with nothing but your wits, your skills, and a deep, abiding hope that you remembered to pack your lucky wooden spoon. The wedding is over, the bread has been broken, the chickens have survived, barely. And the neighbors have finished speculating about whether you'll outlast your new husband or the thatched roof over your head. Ready or not, you are now someone's wife, officially, permanently, and with all the benefits and headaches that medieval matrimony has to offer. Spoiler alert. The headaches outnumber the benefits by a healthy margin. Your new home isn't a romantic cottage covered in roses. It's a one-room hut with a door that doesn't quite shut, a fireplace that's mostly smoke, and in-laws who come with the package. Like an extended warranty you never wanted. Privacy is a theoretical concept. Your bridal suite is the family bed, shared with snoring relatives and at least one cow with strong opinions about where she sleeps. You try to be optimistic. After all, marriage is a fresh start. Too bad it smells exactly like the old start, just with more expectations. The first morning sets the tone for everything that follows. Forget breakfast in bed. You're up before dawn, elbow deep in someone else's porridge pot, and learning the new family's rules by trial, error, and the occasional sharp word from your mother-in-law. She's an expert in passive-aggressive instruction. "Oh, you stir the soup like that? How modern." It's like auditioning for a role you didn't want in a play you've never seen. If you thought you were done with chores after leaving your own family, think again. The chores have simply multiplied and gotten more confusing. You're in charge of sweeping, cooking, fetching, mending, and pretending to know exactly where the good ladle is kept. Your hands are raw before noon. Your back aches. And you haven't even figured out which goat is yours to milk yet. The family's expectations are as endless as the piles of laundry, and mistakes are noticed immediately. Mealtimes are another trial by fire. You serve your husband first, then his parents, then everyone else, then finally yourself, assuming anything is left. If dinner is a disaster, you will hear about it from everyone, including the toddler and the family dog. You quickly learn that medieval marriage is less about partnership and more about strategic endurance. Let's talk about your husband. Maybe he's shy, maybe he's nervous. Maybe he smells vaguely of onions and old leather. You don't know him well enough to be sure. Small talk is awkward, especially when the only privacy you have is during the 5 minutes it takes to fetch water together. Romance, if it exists, comes in small doses, like the time he doesn't criticize your bread or asks if you want the last turnip. Swoon, the wedding night is hyped up by the local gossip mill. But the reality is about as glamorous as scrubbing a pig. There's no candlelight or poetry, just cold feet, a lot of uncertainty, and the sudden realization that you still don't really know what's supposed to happen. In-laws snore loudly in the corner. You do your best to be brave, patient, and polite, all at once. If all else fails, you can always count sheep, or, more likely, actual sheep. Marriage also means new social responsibilities. You're expected to represent your husband's household with dignity, keep up appearances, and not draw any attention. Unless, of course, you mess up, in which case everyone will notice immediately. The local women are eager to share tips, stories, and unsolicited advice, most of which boil down to keep your mouth shut and your apron clean. And, of course, the talk of children begins before you've even figured out where to store the cheese. If you're not pregnant by next Michaelmas, expect questions. If you are, congratulations, you've just unlocked the next level of medieval responsibility, with even less sleep and even more chores. In the end, early marriage is less about joy and more about survival. You work, you learn, and you laugh, sometimes just to keep from crying. If you're lucky, you and your new husband will find a rhythm, a private joke, or at least a moment of quiet at sunset. If not, well, there's always tomorrow. And maybe, just maybe, a clean apron. Congratulations, you're officially married, and it's time to move in. Except you're not moving into your own little love nest. You're moving into your husband's family home, along with his parents, siblings, and every farm animal that can fit through the door. Think of it as a starter pack for adulthood. One lumpy bed, a handful of in-laws, and a goat with boundary issues. Privacy? Not in the starter pack. The big arrival is a letdown. No one is waiting with flowers or a homemade pie. Instead, your new mother-in-law gives you a once-over that says, "I hope you know how to scrub floors." She's been running this household since before you were born, and she is not about to hand over the keys. Your new siblings-in-law stare at you like you're a strange bird. One that's possibly here to take their share of the bread. Even the family dog eyes you suspiciously, probably worried you'll get first dibs on table scraps. Your room is more a concept than a space. A thin mattress on the floor, barely separated from the rest of the household by a sagging curtain. If you were hoping for somewhere to hang your wedding dress, bad luck. There's one peg, and it's already being used for the good cloak. Your trousseau, 2 spare tunics, and a battered comb fits under the bed, next to someone else's boots and a chicken who refuses to move out. Daily life is an endless group project. From the moment you wake up, you're plunged into the family routine. Morning starts with a chorus of snores, the clatter of someone looking for the bread knife, and the cow loudly announcing she's ready to be milked. You scramble to figure out what needs doing and when. But it doesn't matter. You're always at least 2 steps behind. The only thing faster than the pace is the speed with which everyone points out your mistakes. Meals are loud, crowded, and competitive. You sit where you're told, eat what you're given, and quickly learn that asking for seconds is a rookie mistake. You keep your elbows in, your head down, and hope that the bread makes it all the way around before disappearing entirely. Conversation is mostly logistics. Who's seen the bucket? Is that my sock? Whose turn is it to sweep the floor? With the occasional passive-aggressive remark about how the porridge used to be thicker. Your mother-in-law sets the tone for the day, and her judgment is legendary. If the table isn't set just right, she'll fix it herself, loudly, so everyone knows she's fixing your mistake. If you sweep the floor, she'll find the one spot you missed and sweep it again, making sure you're watching. It's a constant, low-grade competition for approval, and the scoring system is entirely in her head. You'll figure it out by your 3rd winter, or die trying. Your new siblings-in-law, meanwhile, are experts in shifting blame and sneaking out of chores. If something breaks, it's your fault. If the stew burns, they saw you near the fire. If the goat gets into the laundry, again, you clearly need to keep a closer eye. You learn to defend your honor with a quick wit and a faster mop. As for the animals, they are everywhere. Chickens wander through the house with zero respect for your personal space. The family pig thinks the hearth is his domain. You develop a 6th sense for dodging droppings, and you're never more than 2 feet from something that chews, clucks, or sheds. The scent is distinctive, but in the rare moments when everyone is busy and the evening light turns golden, you might find yourself sharing a laugh over a spilled bucket or a runaway goat. You're not at home, not yet, but you're surviving. And someday, maybe, you'll be the one in charge of the keys, the chores, and the only peg in the house. For now, just keep your head down, your sense of humor sharp, and never, ever challenge your mother-in-law at bread baking. That's how wars get started. Congratulations, you are now the proud manager of a medieval household, armed with nothing but a rag, a dream, and a suspiciously greasy bar of soap that's seen better centuries. Forget everything you know about modern cleaning products. There are no sprays, no foaming bleach, and absolutely no scented candles to mask the aroma of 10 people, 5 animals, and a bucket of old cabbage. Welcome to the Olympics of grime. No medals, just a lingering rash. Cleaning is not a task, it's a relentless way of life. Every surface in your home is alive. The floor crawls, the walls weep, and the ceiling hosts a small but dedicated population of spiders who pay no rent. The open concept layout means there are no doors to close, just endless dirt flowing from one end of the room to the other. The family's daily activities guarantee a steady supply of new messes. Every time you sweep, someone immediately walks through with muddy boots, or a goat helpfully deposits a fresh present near the fire. Let's start with the floors. They are made of packed earth, sometimes just dirt, sometimes a mud and straw combo that's been trampled flat by generations of feet, both human and otherwise. Sweeping is an act of hope, not completion. You use a broom made of tied twigs that was designed by someone who clearly hated wrists. As you sweep, clouds of dust and mystery fluff swirl up, settle back down, and somehow leave the floor looking exactly the same as before. If it's winter, the mud multiplies. If it's summer, everything dries into a cement. Like crust that only breaks up when you trip over it, the kitchen is a battleground. There are no countertops, just tables covered in a thick patina of history and breadcrumbs. Washing dishes is a festival of frustration. You scrub with cold water from a bucket, rough sand, or, if you're feeling fancy, a sliver of soap made with animal fat and lye. The soap smells a bit like disappointment and last year's stew. You rinse plates in a second bucket, but everyone knows that whatever germs survived the sand will definitely be killed by the next round of boiling soup, or so you hope. Linen and clothes present their own set of medieval challenges. Laundry Day is a public spectacle that takes place at the nearest river or communal wash pit. You lug baskets of filthy, scratchy clothes, and by clothes, we mean the one set of garments each person owns, to the water, where you join the other women in a chorus of scrubbing, wringing, and swapping local gossip. There is no stain remover, just elbow grease, a paddle, and occasionally the judicious application of ash or lye to particularly offensive patches. If you're lucky, the clothes dry on the line in the Sunday. If not, they freeze solid or are snatched by a mischievous gust of wind, never to be seen again. Bathrooms, if you can call them that, are just buckets behind the house or a small pit out back. Emptying the family's night soil is a duty that falls to the youngest or the slowest to volunteer. There is no air freshener, but if you squint, the cold winter air is just as good, provided you stand upwind. The chamber pots are rinsed with water and the hope that nobody will visit today. Tidying is a constant negotiation with entropy. Dusting means waving a cloth over surfaces and pretending you can't see the mouse droppings. The concept of deep cleaning is reserved for holy days, big feasts, or visits from the parish priest. On those days, the entire family scrubs, scrapes, and hides anything too grimy to explain away. Windows are wiped with rags, corners are swept, and for one brief moment, the house is almost clean. But the next day, it starts all over. You chase the mess, the animals, the siblings, and the mysterious smells, knowing you'll never win. But in those rare moments when the sunlight comes in, the table is set, and the bread is baking, you almost believe you've mastered medieval cleaning. Almost. Sunrise. The rooster crows, the family stirs, and your day as a medieval woman and part-time human tractor officially begins. Whether you're expecting your first child, your seventh, or simply another batch of blisters, you're needed in the fields. Medieval life has no sick days, no paid time off, and definitely no maternity leave. You work the land, you feed the livestock, and if you're pregnant, well, you get the distinct honor of doing it all while carrying extra cargo. The fields aren't the romantic patchwork of golden wheat you see on postcards. They're muddy, rock-strewn, and, depending on the season, either bone-dry or soggier than a forgotten bath mat. Your tools are simple: a heavy wooden hoe, a creaky old plough, and hands that always seem to find the sharp end of something. If you're lucky, there's an ox to help. If not, congratulations, you're the ox today. Work begins with weeding. A task so endless you'll start dreaming about nettles and dandelions. Kneeling in the dirt, your dress soaks up mud, your knees go numb, and your back reminds you that medieval medicine is more theory than practice. Pregnant? Great. Add a chorus of advice from older women about what you should and shouldn't lift, eat, or even look at. But don't expect to get out of anything. You're still expected to keep up, baby bump and all. Sowing and planting are community affairs. The whole family heads out, each person with a job. You scatter seeds, cover them, and pray the birds don't immediately undo your hard work. If you're lucky, the sun is out. If you're not, you slog through drizzle and mud, seeds sticking to your fingers and hope sticking to your soul. Farming is about patience, endurance, and quietly resenting the neighbor whose field somehow always looks better. Harvest season is an all-hands-on-deck operation. You cut, gather, and bind, working from sunrise until the last speck of light. The work is relentless. Every armful of grain scratches your skin. Every bushel you carry adds another ache to the collection. You pause only to wipe sweat from your brow, or to listen as someone tries to make harvesting fun with a song. The song usually turns into a complaint, but at least it passes the time. Pregnancy adds a special twist to all of this. You get advice from everyone. Don't walk near the well. Eat more onions. Rub your belly with goose fat for luck. No matter how swollen your ankles or how loudly your back protests, the crops must come in. The nearest thing to sympathy is someone letting you sit down for a few extra minutes during lunch if you're quick enough to claim a spot in the shade. Lunch in the field is basic but welcome. Usually, it's bread, cheese, if you're lucky, and whatever vegetables you can grab on the way out the door. You eat quickly, washing it down with weak ale or water that you try not to think about too hard. There's little time for lingering. Every break is timed, and the work never gets easier. As autumn sets in, you prepare the fields for winter. More weeding, more digging, more silent pleas for better weather next year. Your hands are raw, your arms are stronger than you ever thought possible, and your feet have lost all memory of clean, dry socks. If you're pregnant, you might go into labor in the field, send word home, and get helped back to the house between contractions. There are no dramatic scenes, just a lot of grit, a lot of sighs, and the quiet determination that keeps the whole village running. By sunset, you're exhausted, aching, and covered in a patchwork of mud, sweat, and what you sincerely hope is only compost. You trudge home, knowing tomorrow will be the same. But in those fleeting moments when the work is done and the air is cool, you look across the fields and realize you are the heartbeat of the farm, the backbone of the family, and, somehow, still standing. Pregnancy in medieval Europe is less a joyful journey and more a high-stakes game of roulette with your health and sanity as the main prize. The moment you start showing, the entire village suddenly becomes a team of unsolicited advisors. Everyone from your mother-in-law to the baker's wife, to the lady who only owns 2 teeth but endless opinions. If you thought modern pregnancy apps were overwhelming, try having your neighbors monitor your every move and ask pointed questions about the color of your ankles. Medical care, in the sense we know it, is a distant fantasy. There are no checkups, no ultrasounds, no pamphlets with smiling babies and stretch mark cream. Your local doctor is a cross between a barber, a blacksmith, and a hopeful amateur botanist. The real star of medieval obstetrics is the village midwife, a woman with hands of iron, nerves of steel, and more birth stories than any dinner guest should ever share. She's seen it all: breech births, twins, babies born during thunderstorms, bad omen, obviously, and at least one case of a baby supposedly born with teeth. Cravings? Sure, but no one is running to the store at midnight for pickles. The advice is blunt: eat what you're given, avoid windy foods like beans, and for heaven's sake, don't look at anything ugly or you might curse the baby. There are endless superstitions. Wear an amulet against evil spirits. Avoid walking under ladders or risk a cross-eyed child. And never, ever sew on a Friday or you might stitch the baby's fate. Sometimes the line between advice and outright threats is blurry, but you're too tired to argue. As the months pass, you keep up with all your regular chores, plus a few extra, since pregnant women need to stay active according to every grandmother within a 10-mile radius. Rest is a rare luxury, reserved for moments when you physically can't move another inch. No one expects you to lie around being delicate. In fact, if you're not seen in the fields or at the well, someone will knock on your door just to check you haven't wandered off into the woods to give birth alone. When you do feel unwell, treatments are creative. Herbal teas made from mint or chamomile if you're lucky, boiled moss, or a little restorative ale if you're not. The midwife might prescribe bed rest, which is ignored, or tell you to chew on a clove of garlic for strength. If you're really sick, the priest comes by to pray for you, which is always a mixed blessing. There are no guarantees. Miscarriage is heartbreakingly common, and usually whispered about in the same breath as witchcraft, curses, or God's will. If you're fortunate enough to carry a child to term, you count your blessings and then get right back to work. Multiple pregnancies are expected. Surviving them all is remarkable. When the time comes, you hope for the best and brace for the worst. Childbirth is a community event, but not in a festive way. The midwife arrives, sometimes bringing a helper or two. The room fills with worried whispers, hands clutching rosaries, and a collection of herbal poultices that smell like old shoes. Your husband? He's usually somewhere else, helpfully staying out of the way and trying not to faint. Labor can last hours or days, with the soundtrack of groans, prayers, and stern encouragement. There is no anesthesia, just a lot of yelling and the occasional "push, dear," or you'll never hear the end of it from your mother-in-law. Complications are a constant threat, and survival is not a given for mother or baby. If things go wrong, everyone prays a little harder. But when a healthy baby arrives, squalling, wrinkled, and probably annoyed, you're the hero of the hour. For a few precious moments, you're celebrated, pampered, and handed a cup of the good broth. The rest and relief are brief, because soon enough life resumes. More chores, more mouths to feed, and another round on the great medieval pregnancy roulette wheel. All you can do is hope you'll be lucky enough to spin again. You've reached the finish line of pregnancy, if you can call a medieval childbirth a finish line, and not the opening scene of a medical disaster film. There's no maternity ward, no sterile sheets, and certainly no birthing playlist. Instead, you're at home, in the very same bed you share with everyone from your husband to the occasional visiting chicken. The midwife is summoned, the priest is notified, just in case, and the family starts whispering prayers as if you've already run out of time. Labor can begin at any moment, usually when you're in the middle of something critical, like stirring the pottage or hauling water. There are no epidurals or breathing exercises, just stern advice to bite this stick and keep quiet. The neighbors are listening. The only pain relief on offer is maybe a swig of ale, a leather strap to bite, and the ancient wisdom that the sooner it's over, the sooner you can get back to work. Sometimes a neighbor brings a handful of lavender or mint to soothe the nerves. But mostly, it's wishful thinking. The midwife is the star of the show, and she takes her job seriously. She's seen it all: breech babies, surprise twins, difficult labors that last into the next sunrise. She's there with her bag of tools: a sharp knife for cutting the cord, or, don't ask, a length of twine and a fistful of herbs. Her real power is her confidence and her unflinching ability to take charge. She might snap at your husband to leave the room, or direct your mother-in-law to boil water and stop fretting. The room fills quickly. Women from the village arrive to help or just to watch, whispering advice and stories of their own births. The atmosphere is thick with tension, incense, and the nervous energy of everyone trying to remember which saint is best for safe deliveries. You grip a hand, any hand, until your knuckles turn white, and everyone waits for that telltale cry. Pain comes in waves, sharp and relentless. You grit your teeth, sweat soaking your brow, wishing someone would invent morphine or at least a comfortable pillow. The midwife urges you to push, to breathe, to trust your body. There are no monitors, no emergency C-sections, just hope, muscle, and the determination of a woman who knows that survival is a team sport. Complications are a constant worry. Bleeding, breech positions, or a baby who refuses to arrive can turn an already harrowing experience into a crisis. The priest is sometimes on standby for last rites. The neighbors hover, silent and pale. Sometimes a miracle happens, a healthy baby, a safe mother, and tears of relief all around. Sometimes the outcome is grimmer, and the whole village mourns in hushed voices. But if you're lucky, the ordeal ends with a squalling, red-faced new life, and the world's most exhausted new mother. The midwife cleans and swaddles the baby in scratchy linen, then tucks you back under a pile of blankets with strict orders to rest, at least until you're needed again. The women gossip quietly. The priest offers a prayer of thanks, and for one brief, magical moment, you're the center of the universe. Your reward? The admiration of every woman in the village, a warm bowl of broth, and maybe, just maybe, a day to yourself. The baby is here, the danger is past, and the only thing left is to gather your strength for tomorrow's laundry, next week's fieldwork, and whatever else medieval motherhood has in store. Congratulations, you've survived childbirth. No small feat in a world where pain relief is a mug of ale and a well-placed stick to bite. The baby is here, the midwife has left, and the neighbors have drifted back to their own chaos. You might expect a peaceful moment to admire your handiwork. Instead, medieval motherhood begins with the medieval version of an alarm clock. A hungry infant and a room full of work that never left. From your first day, the shift never ends. Newborns demand constant attention, and there's no stack of diapers, no formula, and certainly no nighttime feedings by a partner on paternity leave. You nurse on demand, because there is literally no other option. The baby is swaddled in scratchy linen and cradled in your arms while you stir the pottage with your free hand and use a foot to nudge the fire back to life. Sleep happens in tiny, unpredictable snippets, always interrupted by wails, livestock, or the sudden panic that you forgot to check on the other children. Because let's be honest, there's always more than one. Babies come in batches, spaced about as far apart as the growing seasons allow. If you're not caring for a newborn, you're chasing toddlers or instructing the older ones in the fine art of not eating dirt. There are no playpens, no soft corners, and definitely no childproofing. Your tools are a sharp eye, a louder voice, and the ability to clean up a disaster before your mother-in-law notices. You learn to spot the exact moment a child is about to shove a frog in their mouth from across the room. Medieval parenting is a group sport. Children are watched by their older siblings, cousins, or the neighbor's girl who just wandered in. There are no scheduled playdates. Children roam, invent games, and settle squabbles with minimal adult supervision and maximum mud. Skinned knees, bruised foreheads, and mysterious rashes are so common that only the most spectacular injuries get a second look. If a child is quiet for more than 5 minutes, everyone gets suspicious. Feeding a medieval family is its own ongoing ordeal. Babies nurse for as long as possible, sometimes into toddlerhood, because milk is safer than the water and more reliable than the bread. Weaning means thin gruel, pottage, or whatever vegetables you can mash. Everyone eats together, and if you're short on food, you fill bellies with stories, songs, and the hope that next year's harvest will be better. No one counts calories, they just count bites. Illness is an ever-present threat. Every cough could be something serious. And fevers are met with herbal teas, prayers, and the anxious looks of women who have seen too much loss. You become an expert at reading a child's color, feeling their forehead, and bargaining with saints for another night of peace. The village midwife is on speed dial, well, as speedy as walking next door gets. Sometimes she helps, sometimes she just shrugs and hands you a garlic necklace. Motherhood in medieval times is not for the faint of heart. You carry children, groceries, water buckets, and the mental load of keeping everyone alive. There is no downtime. Your work is invisible but essential. No one thanks you for it, except maybe your eldest child. If they survive long enough to realize how much you did, the days are long, the years are short, and somehow, through all the exhaustion and chaos, you find joy in the chaos, a giggle, a sticky hug, a quiet moment when the whole family is safe, just for a second, happy, and then someone screams, and your endless shift continues. You've survived another sleepless night, wrangled children, and already fixed a crisis involving a goat and your best tunic. Now comes the next great test of medieval womanhood. Feeding your family. Spoiler, there will be no Michelin stars awarded. Forget Instagram-worthy brunches. The only thing going viral here is yesterday's soup, and not in a fun way. The day starts early, because hunger waits for no one. The kitchen is the heart of the home, but not in a cozy, fresh bread way. The fire smokes more than it cooks. The pot is perpetually crusted, and everything smells faintly of cabbage and defeat. Your pantry is a motley collection of whatever the family managed to grow, trade, or find in the woods. There's a lot of root vegetables, some questionable grains, and if you're lucky, a little cheese that's only slightly suspicious. Breakfast is a utilitarian affair. Cold pottage, maybe a crust of bread, and a cup of weak ale or watered-down milk. There's no coffee, no eggs, unless it's a feast day, and if someone asks for something sweet, they get a story about the time you almost found an apple last autumn. The bread is hearty, dense, and can double as a doorstop if necessary. If there's any left over from yesterday, you soak it in broth to soften it up. A trick passed down through generations of women with strong teeth and stronger wills. Cooking is an endurance test. You work with what you have, and what you have is rarely enough. Every scrap is used, nothing is wasted, and the concept of fresh is loosely defined. Vegetables are chopped and added to the bubbling pot on the hearth, along with grains, dried beans, and, if fortune smiles, a scrap of meat or bone. Spices are a luxury you'll probably never see, so flavor comes from onions, garlic, or the ever-present pinch of salt if you manage to save enough to last until winter. Your tools are basic. A battered knife, a wooden spoon, and a ladle that's seen more repairs than the village bridge. You stir constantly, shooing away hungry children and curious chickens alike. The pot never empties completely. Instead, you top it up day after day, creating a perpetual stew that tastes a little different each time, sometimes better, sometimes definitely not. Mealtime is loud and chaotic. Everyone crowds around, bowls in hand, jockeying for the best bits. You serve your husband and elders first, then children, and finally yourself. Conversation is mostly about who worked hardest that day and whether the neighbor's cow is looking thin. If anyone complains, they're told they're welcome to try their luck foraging, but good luck outwitting the village geese. Special occasions call for something a little different. Maybe you trade eggs for a bit of dried fish, or, on the rarest of feast days, roast a chicken. But mostly, meals are about survival, not celebration. Food preservation is rudimentary at best, salting, drying, or storing in cool cellars. If something starts to grow mold, you cut it off and hope for the best. Despite the hardships, there's pride in stretching a meager pantry to feed a family. You share stories and laughter over meals, pass down recipes and hard-won wisdom, and make do with what you have. There's a sense of accomplishment in seeing everyone fed, even if dinner is more beige than beautiful and the only garnish is a stray parsley leaf you found growing by the well. And when the last bowl is licked clean, you hang up your spoon, already thinking about tomorrow. In the end, you're not just feeding bellies, you're fueling the village, and that's a recipe worth remembering. If you think getting dressed is a struggle in the modern era, try doing it medieval style. Your wardrobe is refreshingly simple, mainly because you own about 3 things, none of them matching, and all of them scratchier than your worst wool sweater. Forget about color coordination or seasonal trends. Your look is functional desperation, accessorized with equal parts dirt, patches, and a faint, lingering scent of goat. Your everyday outfit is a linen shift, a long underdress that's supposed to keep your other clothes clean. Spoiler, it doesn't. Over that, you add a wool kirtle, thick enough to keep out the wind, but thin enough to guarantee you'll freeze in winter and sweat in summer. There's no zipper, no buttons, just laces and hope. You layer on whatever you have, usually another tunic or a threadbare cloak, depending on the weather and whether the last laundry day was more than a month ago. Footwear is aspirational. Shoes are handmade from stiff, untreated leather that softens just in time to fall apart. If you're lucky enough to own a pair, you guard them like treasure and wear them only for church, weddings, or especially treacherous mud. Otherwise, you go barefoot, learning early to dodge sharp rocks, animal droppings, and the occasional overly curious goose. Accessories? You might have a belt, useful for holding up an apron or hanging a knife, for kitchen work or, let's be honest, personal safety. Maybe a scarf for your head, partly for modesty, partly for hiding the fact that your hair is an ecosystem all its own. Medieval hats are reserved for special occasions or anyone bold enough to pretend they aren't just hiding a bad hair day. Now let's address the elephant in the room, lice. Everyone has them. Nobles, peasants, children, priests, nobody is immune. Combing out lice is a daily ritual as essential as saying your prayers. Your mother has a special knit comb made from bone or wood, and everyone takes turns, usually outside, so the tiny offenders don't hop back inside before the job is done. If you're caught scratching your head in church, you're in good company. Laundry day is a village event. Clothes are hauled to the river, scrubbed with harsh soap or ashes, and beaten on rocks until either the stains come out or the fabric gives up. Drying happens on bushes, fences, or wherever the sun happens to shine. Sometimes your dress freezes solid before it dries. Other times it just smells like wet dog, no matter how hard you tried. You wear the same dress every day until it's more patch than original fabric. If it gets a hole, you mend it with whatever thread you can find. Wool, linen, or occasionally a repurposed bit of string from the kitchen. Status is measured not in how new your clothes are, but in how cleverly you can hide the repairs. A particularly creative patch job might even earn you a compliment or two at the well. Fashion is less about standing out and more about surviving. The look is determined by practicality, warmth, modesty, and the ability to keep working without tripping over your own hem. Still, there's a secret pride in finding a bit of color, a dyed ribbon, a lucky blue bead, or a rare scrap of embroidery. When you do get something new, You wear it proudly, even if new just means new to you. In the end, medieval fashion is about endurance. Your clothes are never really clean, rarely comfortable, and always working as hard as you are. But when you catch your reflection in a puddle, cloak swirling and hair escaping from your scarf, you realize you're not just surviving the era, you're making it look iconic. Let's be honest. If you're looking for a spa day, medieval Europe is not your destination. Bathing, for most women, is less a regular routine and more a whispered rumor. Something that happened once to a distant cousin who caught pneumonia immediately after. In the average village, cleanliness is measured in degrees of mud, not actual hygiene. Water itself is a tricky business. Streams and wells are shared with livestock. And you know the family down the lane dumps their night soil dangerously close to the best watering hole. If you want hot water, you'll have to haul it, heat it over a smoky fire, and guard it from anyone hoping to use it for laundry or soup. By the time you've filled a tub big enough for yourself, you've burned more calories than you'll eat all week. So how often do you actually bathe? The answer is, frankly, not often. Some people believe that too much washing opens your pores and lets in bad humors, so your protective dirt layer is basically medieval hand sanitizer. If you're wealthy, maybe you get a real bath once a month, complete with scented herbs, privacy, and a fresh linen towel. For everyone else, it's a bucket, a rag, and the hope that nobody's watching. Bathhouses exist in towns, but they're more social club than health club. You go there to gossip, scope out the competition, and maybe get a quick rinse in cold, questionable water. But bathhouses get a bad reputation, partly from rumors of scandal, partly because the church says too much nudity leads to trouble. As a result, a lot of public baths are shut down, and cleanliness takes a back seat to moral panic. When you do finally scrub up, the whole event is more ordeal than relaxation. First, you heat the water, a feat of engineering involving buckets, kettles, and at least 3 burned fingers. You strip down in the kitchen, behind a hanging sheet, or, if you're modest, after dark when everyone's outside. The soap is homemade and smells like last year's bacon. You scrub as best you can, bracing against the cold, trying not to think about who used the water before you. If you're very lucky, you get fresh water. More often, you share a tub with siblings, kids, and anyone else who needs a rinse before Sunday. Hair washing is its own trial. There's no shampoo, just harsh lye soap, a rinse with cold rainwater, and a strong hope you don't get lice again before the week is out. Drying off means standing near the fire, watch out for sparks, or wrapping up in your least stiff linen shift. If your hair freezes before it dries, you just call it fashion. Daily hygiene is a creative process. You wipe hands and face with a damp cloth, scrape your nails with a knife, and keep your teeth clean-ish by chewing twigs or rinsing with wine if you're feeling decadent. Perfume? A sprig of mint behind the ear, or, more realistically, just a resigned acceptance of life's aromas. Despite all this, you survive. You learn to recognize the difference between just earthy and call the midwife. There's a strange comfort in the collective lack of cleanliness. If everyone smells, no one does. When you do emerge from a rare bath, gleaming and pink, and at least temporarily lice-free, you're the envy of every woman at the well. For about 3 hours, or until the next mud puddle gets you. Bathing might be a legend, but you're living proof that a little dirt never hurt. When it comes to beauty in medieval Europe, you're not exactly spoiled for choice. There are no glossy magazines, no YouTube tutorials, and definitely no 10-step skincare routines. The beauty industry is your backyard, your kitchen, and a wild guess based on what your grandmother swears worked in her day. But despite a total lack of mirrors and anything resembling mascara, medieval women are nothing if not resourceful. First, let's talk about skin. Pale is in, and not just because you spent all winter indoors. In the Middle Ages, Fair skin is a status symbol. It means you're not forced to toil in the fields, even if you totally are. To fake a porcelain look, some women dust their faces with ground rice, flour, or even lead-based powder if they're feeling brave and don't mind the side effects, which include, well, death. For everyone else, a good scrub with rough linen and maybe a dab of sheep's milk will have to do. Moisturizer? Animal fat or lard rubbed on at night, which is only slightly less glamorous than it sounds. Eyebrows and eyelashes don't get much attention unless you're noble, and even then, the trend is to pluck them into oblivion or, in some eras, remove them entirely. Why? To show off your forehead, which is somehow the medieval version of contouring. No tweezers, just pinch and hope. Eyeliner is rare, unless you want to risk poking your eye out with a burnt stick. Instead, you pinch your cheeks for color, or, if you're fancy, tint your lips with crushed berries or a little beetroot. Just try not to eat the supplies. Hair care is a true adventure. You probably have long hair, because cutting it is seen as scandalous or, worse, a sign you've joined a convent. Washing happens occasionally, with soap that's as harsh as a peasant's winter and a rinse of cold rainwater. For shine, try egg yolks, or, if you're really bold, a rinse with vinegar. Hair oils are made from herbs, and whatever grease can be skimmed off the cooking pot. Forget salon styles. Braids, buns, and headscarves are the look. Head coverings aren't just about modesty. They're your first line of defense against dirt, lice, and the envious looks of neighbors who wish their scarf matched their one good tunic. Dental care is basic and largely theoretical. If you're determined, you chew on twigs, rub your teeth with ashes, or swish with wine when you can spare it. Toothpaste hasn't been invented yet, so you settle for not rotting as your main dental goal. If you want fresh breath, you chew mint leaves or fennel seeds, assuming the family goat hasn't gotten to them first. Perfume is reserved for the very wealthy, and is usually made from pressed flowers, oils, or spices, assuming you can afford any. For everyone else, there's the natural aroma of hard work, smoke, and whatever the wind blows in. Some women tuck herbs or flowers into their bodice or sleeves for a subtle scent boost. It's not Chanel, but it's better than the alternative. Fashioned with whatever's on hand, medieval beauty hacks are less about perfection and more about practicality and occasionally survival. You're not chasing the next trend. You're making do with what's in the garden, the kitchen, or, in a pinch, the chicken coop. Despite the lack of cosmetics and professional hair care, medieval women find creative ways to look and feel their best. Whether it's a ribbon in your hair, a clever patch on your dress, or a smile that says, "Yes, I survived another bath day," you own your look. Because in this world, confidence is the best beauty trick of all, and it's one that never goes out of style. So, you've made it through another day of hauling water, wrangling children, and chasing chickens out of the bread oven. But in medieval Europe, being a woman isn't just about keeping everyone alive. It's about dodging the ever-present threat of superstition. In a world where most people can't read and science means whatever the priest says after a bad meal, every odd look, strange coincidence, or unlucky sneeze has the potential to ruin your week or your life. If you know how to heal a headache with herbs, you're a suspect. If you keep to yourself, you're a suspect. If you're too loud, too clever, or just too unlucky, you're probably on someone's mental witch list. Medieval villagers love a scapegoat almost as much as they love a good festival. Got a rash? The neighbor's butter won't churn? Did the wind change directions too quickly? Clearly, a woman is to blame. For a medieval woman, surviving superstition is a daily balancing act. You need enough knowledge to keep your family alive, but not so much that people start whispering about your magic. Healing with herbs is a family tradition. Your grandmother swears by nettle tea for fevers and garlic for curses. But you keep these remedies quiet, sharing them only with trusted friends and never in front of the wrong set of ears. Word spreads fast in the village, and it's a short walk from wise woman to witch if someone's crops fail unexpectedly. The church keeps a close eye on anything that looks like pagan tradition. Women who gather herbs at dawn, read the weather from bird patterns, or even mention old folk tales can draw unwanted attention. Certain times of year are especially dangerous. Midsummer, Halloween, and any day ending in Y when the local priest is in a mood. Witch hunts aren't daily events, but they happen often enough to keep you humble, careful, and always ready with a harmless explanation for everything. Gossip is the real witchcraft. The local well is the medieval version of the rumor mill. It only takes one person to say, "You looked at her funny during Mass," for suspicion to blossom like mold in a damp cellar. The more eccentric you are, maybe you wear a bright scarf, laugh too loud, or have a pet cat, the higher your risk of being named in a late-night whisper. Widow, you're doubly suspicious. Childless, triple. You start to see why some women keep to themselves or suddenly become very devout. If you do get accused, there's not much in the way of due process. Trials might include tests like being dunked in a pond, sink and drown. Innocent, float and survive, definitely guilty, or being made to touch a hot iron and seeing if you heal quickly enough to satisfy the crowd. Confessions are sometimes encouraged with threats, shouting, or, if things get really ugly, actual torture. All this because you knew how to make cough syrup out of honey and thyme. But there's a kind of dark humor in all this. Most villagers are just as scared as you are of illness, famine, and the things they can't explain. Sometimes, the women accused of witchcraft are the very ones who kept everyone healthy last winter. So, you keep your head down, share your knowledge quietly, and cross your fingers that this year, the wind stays calm and the cows don't go missing. If you're lucky, you'll outlast the gossip and live to be known as the wise old woman. Not a witch, but just a survivor with a few good secrets and a collection of herbs hidden under the bed. If you thought medieval daily life was hard, just wait until you add the church bells. Religion isn't just a side dish in your existence. It's the main course, with extra servings and absolutely no substitutions. From your first wail in the cradle to your final sigh, your life is measured, guided, and occasionally tripped up by the local church. For a medieval woman, piety is both your shield and your leash. Your schedule is dictated by the tolling of the church bell. Wake up, bell. Meals, bell. Work, bell. Prayer, more bells. The rhythm of your day is a hymn with no chorus and way too many verses. Sundays, feast days, and holy days are the only times you're officially allowed to rest, although rest means going to Mass, fasting, and worrying about all the chores piling up at home. Your place in church is strictly defined. Women sit apart from men, heads covered by scarf or veil. You kneel, you bow, and you whisper the right prayers at the right moments. Sometimes in Latin, even if you have no idea what you're saying. The priest is the law, the judge, and the news anchor. If he says you're blessed, you're blessed. If he says you're in trouble, you're in real trouble. Confession is a regular event. You line up with the other women to tell the priest about every unkind thought, lost chicken, or moment when you wished your husband would fall into a puddle. The priest listens, sometimes doles out penance, extra prayers, maybe some fasting, and reminds you that God is always watching, especially when you're tempted to skip Mass or eat the cheese set aside for tithes. Guilt is not just a feeling, it's a lifestyle. The church decides what you wear, what you eat, and when you can eat it. Meat on Fridays? Absolutely not. Unless you want to be the subject of next Sunday's sermon. Butter during Lent? only if you paid for a special dispensation. Every stage of your life, birth, marriage, childbirth, death, is marked by a religious ceremony. If something goes wrong, it's because you didn't pray hard enough. If something goes right, you thank the saints, not yourself. Education is a privilege, usually reserved for boys or the rare girl sent to a convent. Most women know only a handful of prayers by heart and rely on stained glass windows and the priest's stories for their knowledge of the Bible. Scripture is in Latin, so you get the highlights. Don't envy your neighbor, obey your husband, keep your head covered, and make sure your soul is as clean as your hands are dirty. Of course, religion is also a powerful tool for controlling women. The church teaches that a wife must obey her husband, bear children, and accept suffering as a ticket to heaven. Disagree? That's a sin. Speak out? That's pride. And pride comes before a tumble down the social ladder. If you're outspoken, you risk being labeled troublesome, or worse, heretical. Silence is golden, piety is expected. Your prayers are currency, and your reputation as a good woman depends on your ability to follow the rules, even the ones that seem made up on the spot. But faith is also a source of strength. When life is harsh and the world is unfair, you find solace in familiar rituals, the soft glow of candlelight, and the whispered hope that there's more waiting for you than just another load of laundry. For a medieval woman, religion isn't just about control. It's about finding purpose, comfort, and the faint promise that somewhere, somehow, all the suffering might actually be worth it. So, you're wondering if a medieval woman ever gets to relax. The answer, technically, is yes, but only if you define relaxation as briefly not carrying something heavy. Downtime in your world is measured in heartbeats, not hours, and it's always subject to interruption by a hungry child, a braying goat, or the distant sound of your mother-in-law remembering another chore you forgot. Forget the idea of a day off. Medieval life has no weekends, and leisure isn't even in your vocabulary unless you count Sunday afternoons spent standing in church, trying not to think about all the things you still need to do. The best you can hope for is a stolen moment here and there. A few quiet minutes at the well, gossiping with other women, or a brief respite while you mend clothes by the fading light of the hearth. If you're spinning wool, that's as close as you get to me time. Spinning, weaving, and mending are technically chores, but with enough practice, your hands work on autopilot while your mind drifts to happier places, like imagining a world where your bread never burns and your shift doesn't itch. Sometimes, you and the other women gather for communal tasks. Yes, you're all working, but there's laughter, stories, and the occasional scandalous rumor about someone's uncle's cousin who once ate 3 eggs in one sitting. Downtime for children means running wild outdoors, inventing games with rocks and sticks, and coming home only when the church bell rings for supper. For you, downtime means sending the children outside and snatching 5 minutes to yourself, maybe just to sit and breathe, or to savor the last crumb of cheese without sharing. There's an art to hiding your snacks, by the way. The truly expert medieval mother knows to stash a treat behind the kindling pile or inside a hollowed-out turnip. Festivals and holy days are a double-edged sword. They're a break from the usual grind, but they come with their own mountain of preparation. You clean, cook, and worry about what to wear, then stand in a crowded square for hours while your feet go numb. Still, there's music, dancing, and the comfort of being surrounded by people who know exactly how hard you work and aren't shy about saying so. If you're lucky enough to live near water, washing clothes at the river becomes a social event. You can vent, joke, or just listen to the splash and chatter, knowing that everyone's secrets are safe under the noise of the current. These are the moments where friendships are built, complaints are aired, and the latest village news is exchanged at lightning speed. Nighttime is another chance for rare relaxation. After the children are asleep, you might sit by the fire, share a story, or simply enjoy the quiet hum of a house finally at rest. If you're feeling ambitious, you might even sneak outside to gaze at the stars, reminding yourself there's a world beyond your chores, one that's peaceful and vast and blissfully silent. But don't get too comfortable. Someone will always wake. The baby will cry, or the wind will rattle the shutters just as you're starting to drift off. Medieval downtime is a fleeting, precious thing. Like the last sliver of sunlight before the day ends, you cherish it when it comes, knowing that tomorrow the rooster will crow and the whole cycle will start again. And so, your downtime is really just a well-earned pause, a brief, glorious breath before plunging back into the endless shift of medieval womanhood. It's been a long, bone-tiring day. You've done the chores, calmed the children, managed not to poison anyone at dinner, and finally, the sun is sinking below the village rooftops. It should be time to retreat to your private sanctuary, to stretch out, relax, and close the door on the world. But in medieval Europe, the bedroom is a concept as rare as a hot bath in February. Privacy? Not only is it not guaranteed, it's practically mythical. The family home is a single room, maybe two if you're wealthy, or have a suspiciously successful uncle. Everyone, parents, children, babies, grandparents, the odd orphaned cousin, and occasionally a farm animal or two, shares the same sleeping space. There's no such thing as a personal corner, let alone a room of your own. At night, bodies pile in wherever there's space: beds, benches, straw mats, or just the warmest patch of dirt near the fire. Your own bed is a lumpy mattress stuffed with straw, feathers if you're fancy, and a lifetime supply of bedbugs. Sheets are an afterthought. Blankets are whatever's thickest and least damp. You wrap yourself in whatever you can find, sometimes doubling up with a sibling or child, just for warmth. If you're a mother, expect at least one child to sneak into your bed by midnight, elbows and knees in all the wrong places. Sound travels everywhere. Snoring is a communal symphony, with your father-in-law on lead vocals and the neighbor's dog adding harmonies from outside. The only thing separating you from the rest of the family is maybe a thin curtain, or your own wishful thinking. Conversations, arguments, and the nightly chorus of livestock are impossible to block out. If you want to whisper a secret, you have to do it outside, in the dark, and hope the chickens don't overhear. Getting dressed or undressed is a strategic operation. You turn your back, hunch down, and change as quickly as possible, hoping to avoid an audience. If you're feeling especially modest, you wait for everyone else to be distracted by a goat-related emergency before you attempt a costume change. Forget locking the door, there's barely a door at all. Intimacy with your spouse is another matter entirely. Privacy is so rare that newlyweds learn to be quick, quiet, and creative. Many couples become experts at silent communication, an art form honed by years of trying to avoid the curious gaze of small children, parents, or, worst of all, the in-laws. Romance is whispered, fleeting, and conducted under cover of darkness, usually interrupted by a child's bad dream or a cow knocking over the firewood. Hygiene? Well, bedroom odors are inevitable. The air is heavy with the scent of sweat, smoke, wet wool, and whatever the family had for dinner. Open windows are rare, and fresh air even rarer in winter. So everyone just gets used to the smell of life happening in close quarters. The only upside is that nobody notices your personal aroma. Everyone's nose has given up. Still, there's comfort in the closeness. Bodies huddle together for warmth. Children fall asleep to the sound of their mother's voice and the fire crackling in the hearth. Even without privacy, there's a sense of security in knowing you're surrounded by your family, protected from the outside world, and never truly alone. You might dream of a room of your own, but for now, you settle for a warm spot, a dry blanket, and the hope that tonight the rooster will wait until dawn to start his song. Privacy may be a myth, but togetherness is the reality that gets you through the long medieval night. In medieval Europe, your health is a full-time gamble, and the odds are rarely in your favor. Getting sick isn't just inconvenient, it's an existential crisis. There's no such thing as calling the clinic, and no one is asking about your insurance. The only health plan is try not to die, with a strong side of don't let the barber near you with anything sharp. Doctors are rare, expensive, and mostly found in cities where they enjoy diagnosing rich people and avoiding anyone with visible rashes. For everyone else, there's the local wise woman who treats fevers with herbal tea and prayer, or the priest who handles spiritual ailments and the occasional bout of mass hysteria. But the real medical jack of all trades is the barber. He's your hair cutter, your dentist, your part-time surgeon, and the only person in town with scissors that haven't rusted entirely through. Feeling ill? The first step is diagnosis, which is more medieval improv than medical science. Your body is ruled by 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too much of one, and you're in for a world of pain. Or at least, a lecture about how your bad attitude caused your headache. The cure is usually balancing the humors, which translates to time for some bleeding. The barber brings out his bowl and his collection of dull knives. If you're lucky, he's sober. Bloodletting is the go-to cure for just about everything. Fever? Bleed it out. Headache? Bleed it out. General malaise? You guessed it, more bleeding. If that fails, there's leech therapy, which is exactly what it sounds like. A jar of squirming leeches attached to your skin, all in the name of balance. Sometimes, your barber might recommend a poultice, a mysterious paste of bread, herbs, and possibly pigeon droppings, lovingly applied to whatever's hurting. Broken bones? That's a challenge. Splinting is done with sticks and scraps of cloth, and the only painkiller is a stiff drink, or, if you're out of ale, biting down on a rag. Surgery exists, but without anesthesia, so your best hope is to faint early and wake up after it's over. If you survive, congratulations, you're tougher than most. Infections are common, and antibiotics haven't been invented. Any wound, no matter how small, is a potential death sentence. Cuts fester, joints swell, and before you know it, the local priest is lighting a candle for your soul. Dental care is equally terrifying. Toothache? The barber will yank that molar right out, usually with pliers, a prayer, and a crowd of onlookers eager for the day's entertainment. Fillings are for the rich, and mouthwash is a luxury reserved for those who can afford wine. Most people simply lose teeth young and learn to chew creatively. Sickness spreads quickly, no one understands germs, and the concept of quarantine is more about avoiding that one neighbor who always sneezes in your direction. If the plague comes through, you close your doors, pray hard, and hope your house is too boring for death to bother with. Despite all the hazards, most people keep going. You nurse each other back to health with soup, hope, and a little bit of luck. And if you make it through illness, injury, or the barber's latest experiment, you'll have a story to tell at the next festival, along with a new scar and, quite possibly, a lifelong aversion to anyone carrying scissors. In medieval life, survival isn't just about strength. It's about patience, resilience, and a very strong stomach. So you've mastered the art of motherhood, farming, and dodging medieval medical disasters, but what about your rights? In the legal world of medieval Europe, being a woman is sort of like being an extra in a play about men, livestock, and land ownership. Spoiler alert: if you're looking for justice, You might want to lower your expectations and then lower them again. The law is clear. Men are in charge. If you're unmarried, you belong to your father. If you're married, your husband holds all the cards. And by cards, we mean property, money, children, and the right to decide just about everything, from what's for dinner to who inherits the family goat. Women, legally speaking, are closer to livestock than to full-fledged humans. The best you can hope for is a kind lord, a distracted husband, or an older brother with a sense of humor. Property? Forget it, unless you're a widow. Widows are a rare exception. If your husband dies, you might inherit some land or a cow, but only if there's no son or nephew around to claim it. Even then, your rights are temporary. If you remarry, everything goes to your new husband. If you stay single, expect distant relatives to help manage your affairs, usually in ways that benefit them more than you. A clever widow is both admired and feared. She's independent, but that just means everyone's waiting to accuse her of witchcraft the minute the milk goes sour. Marriage contracts exist, but you rarely get a say in the details. Your dowry is negotiated by your parents, and the terms always favor your future husband. Divorce? Not a chance. Marriage is for life, no matter how miserable that life may be. If things go very badly, you can appeal to the local priest or lord, but their main advice is to pray harder, try not to complain, and keep your head down. Children are not yours in any modern sense. They belong to your husband and his family line. If your marriage fails to produce a son, everyone will speculate about what's wrong with you, not him. Custody disputes are decided quickly. Children stay with the man, unless he dies, and then they become someone else's responsibility, usually a male relative. If you do outlive everyone, you might end up as the respected matriarch, or just as the old lady in the corner talking to the chickens. Testifying in court is a tricky business. Women's words carry less weight than men's. You need male witnesses to back you up, or you're likely to be ignored. In criminal cases, your main legal use is as a witness to someone else's bad behavior, or, sometimes, as the accused. Women are easy scapegoats for everything from theft to witchcraft. If you find yourself in the defendant's chair, don't expect mercy. Punishments are swift and harsh, fines, public shaming, or worse. Despite these grim realities, women do find ways to exercise agency, managing the home, influencing their children, or wielding quiet power behind the scenes. Nuns and abbesses sometimes command respect in the religious world, running convents and even owning property. In some towns, merchant widows carve out economic niches. Still, the system is not designed with you in mind. The bottom line: in medieval Europe, legal rights for women are mostly a punchline. You learn to navigate the system by being clever, patient, and occasionally invisible. If you're lucky, you get through life with your dignity, and maybe your best goat still intact. If you thought life as a medieval woman was already hard enough, just wait until you add violence into the mix. Life in the Middle Ages is unpredictable. A full-time lottery of accidents, arguments, and outright aggression. There's always a low hum of danger in the air, and the question is never if but when you'll have to face it. Start with home life. Medieval law gives husbands the right to discipline their wives and children, and the local authorities are unlikely to intervene unless someone ends up in a ditch. Domestic violence is common, public, and often ignored. After all, it's considered a private matter. If your husband is reasonable, you're lucky. If not, you learn to read his moods better than you read the Bible. A sharp tongue or a burnt supper can be enough to earn you a slap, and there's little recourse beyond endurance or hoping he drinks himself into a nap instead. But the threat doesn't stop at your front door. The entire village is a pressure cooker: jealousies, rivalries, and the constant struggle for survival turn neighbors into potential enemies. Disputes over land, water, or even the best place at the bread oven can end in shouting, shoving, or worse. Public punishments are a spectacle: stocks, pillories, whippings, or a dunking in the village pond. Everyone gathers to watch, partly for justice, partly for entertainment, and partly to remind themselves not to be next. Wander outside your village, and things get even riskier. Highwaymen, bandits, and the occasional disgruntled mercenary roam the countryside, preying on anyone unlucky enough to travel alone. The local lord's men might offer protection, but only if you're worth the effort. Most women travel in groups, keeping to the main roads and praying they're not mistaken for someone with money, jewelry, or a grudge against the sheriff. War is a constant threat, simmering in the background of everyday life. Lords feud, kingdoms clash, and ordinary people are caught in the crossfire. Soldiers passing through might demand food, shelter, or hospitality, a word that rarely means what you hope. If a battle comes too close, you hide the valuables, bar the doors, and hope your home looks too poor to bother pillaging. When armies leave, the real work begins. Repairing, rebuilding, and counting the missing. Then there are the random acts of violence that no one can predict. A drunken brawl at the tavern. A child caught in a scuffle between feuding families. Wild animals, wolves, boars, or even a runaway ox can turn an ordinary afternoon into a survival exercise. If you hear shouting in the village square, you drop what you're doing and go watch. Partly for safety, and partly because drama is the closest thing to entertainment. Justice, when it comes, is harsh. Thieves lose hands. Gossips wear the scold's bridle, an iron mask that silences troublesome women. And anyone accused of witchcraft or heresy faces the real possibility of torture, drowning, or burning. Trials are less about evidence and more about public opinion, and if you're on the wrong side of a rumor, things can get ugly fast. In short, violence is woven into the fabric of medieval life. You learn to keep your head down, your opinions quieter, and your friends close. You rely on your wits as much as your luck, knowing that any day could turn dangerous without warning. Survival isn't just about hard work. It's about dodging blows, mending wounds, and hoping the wheel of misfortune spins past your door, at least for another night. If you manage to survive medieval womanhood long enough to reach old age, congratulations, you are living proof that miracles happen. In a world where middle-aged is anything over 30 and childbirth is a full-contact sport, just making it to your 40s is enough to earn you local legend status. People don't ask your age. They just look at your hands, count your surviving teeth, and make a wild guess. Growing old is a badge of honor, but it's also a daily challenge. Your body is a map of everything you've endured. Calloused hands from years of scrubbing, scars from accidental burns and bites, and a spine that cracks and pops like an old church door. If you still have your eyesight, your own hair, and most of your original joints, you're a statistical anomaly. Most mornings begin with a symphony of aches, and your knees predict the weather better than any priest. With age comes a shift in your duties. You're less likely to be in the fields dawn to dusk, but don't expect a peaceful retirement. You're now the official family advisor, dispute settler, and human encyclopedia of village gossip. Grandchildren are handed to you with little warning and no apologies, and you're trusted to watch them all while someone else runs errands or just needs a nap. There's no pension, but you do get the warmest spot by the fire if you're quick, the last say in bedtime stories, and the right to complain as loudly as you want about how things used to be. Your value in the household is higher than ever, just not always in the ways you imagined. You're a living memory of hard times, bad harvests, and that one winter when the bread ran out and everyone survived on boiled onions and hope. The children listen wide-eyed to your tales, and the adults occasionally seek your wisdom. usually after ignoring it the first 3 times. You've earned respect the hard way, but you still keep an eye out for signs of being shuffled off to the edge of the hearth, or worse, a relative's house where the soup is thin and the company thinner. Health is a constant worry. There are no doctors specializing in geriatric care, just the same barber, surgeon, and wise women you grew up with, now offering advice that sounds suspiciously like rest more and complain less. Toothaches, failing eyesight, and creaky bones are shrugged off as part of the package. If you catch a cold, you might get a prayer or a cup of weak ale, but mostly you're expected to power through. After all, you survived the plague. You can survive a sniffle socially. Old age is a balancing act. You've seen enough to know that too much wisdom, spoken too loudly, can earn you a reputation as a meddler, or, if the crops fail, a whisper of witchcraft. The line between venerated elder and suspicious old woman is thinner than your patience. If you're widowed, you walk a tightrope between freedom and vulnerability. Independence is respected, but so is the convenience of blaming an old woman for anything that goes wrong. Yet for all the hardships, there are moments of real joy, watching a grandchild take their first steps, sharing laughter with friends who remember the same songs, or just sitting in the sun with a warm bowl of soup and the knowledge that, somehow, you made it. In a world designed to wear women down, surviving to old age isn't just luck, it's the greatest triumph of all. And if you manage to tell the tale, you've truly beaten the odds. You've survived childhood, childbirth, famine, fevers, gossip, and goats. If you've reached your final years, you're not just a survivor. You're the family's anchor, the keeper of stories, and the quietly powerful heart of the household. In a world where the average lifespan is short and each day brings new dangers, the true legacy of a medieval woman is measured not in riches, but in the ripples left behind when you're finally gone. For most, you won't leave behind a written will or a chest full of treasure. Instead, your legacy is woven into everyday life. In the way you taught your daughters to braid their hair, mend a tunic, or handle a stubborn chicken. It's in the recipe for pottage you improved every winter and the lullabies that lulled generations to sleep. The wisdom you pass down is practical, unvarnished, and sometimes disguised as a warning. Don't trust a man who smiles too much. Always keep salt in the house. Turnips are not a main course. Perhaps your most lasting mark is the family you helped build and protect. Each child is a living story. Each grandchild a new chapter. You keep memories alive, both the good and the terrible, teaching the next generation what real endurance looks like. Your tales are both cautionary and comforting, reminders of plagues survived, harvests lost, and the one time the cow made it onto the roof. These stories become part of village lore, repeated long after you're gone, sometimes with extra details you'd never believe. Beyond the household, your influence spreads quietly. Maybe you mediated a feud between neighbors or helped nurse a friend back to health. Maybe you had a secret stash of dried herbs, or a trick for predicting the weather, or the rare gift of making people laugh even when there was nothing to laugh about. Your legacy might be a patchwork quilt of skills and kindnesses, small, vital things that held your world together. In a time when women's names rarely made it into official records, your impact is found in everyday miracles: a warm meal, a healed wound, a mended fence, a child comforted after a nightmare. If you're lucky, you die surrounded by family, with people at your bedside who still remember the sound of your voice. Your funeral is a somber affair. No grand monuments, just prayers, tears, and the careful sharing of the few possessions you treasured. A worn comb, a favorite scarf, a wooden spoon smoothed by decades of use. Someone might plant flowers at your grave, or remember to light a candle for you on cold winter nights. But your true memorial is in the habits, traditions, and quiet strength that persist. It's in the way your descendants knead bread, settle arguments, or greet each sunrise with a mixture of hope and stubbornness. Maybe your advice becomes legend, your scolding remembered fondly, your laugh a ghost in the rafters whenever the family gathers for supper. The end game for a medieval woman isn't measured in what you owned or the rules you followed, but in the lives you touched, the comforts you created, and the resilience you inspired. History may forget your name, but your lessons ripple onward, through the family, the village, and the world you worked so hard to hold together. And that, in the end, is a legacy no hardship can erase. Every village has its gathering point, the market square, where business, gossip, and the occasional runaway pig collide. For the medieval woman, running a market stall is equal parts economic necessity, social theatre, and full-contact sport. You may not be the head of a guild or the master of a merchant fleet, but if you can sell 36 eggs before noon and keep your dignity intact, you're basically the CEO of survival. Setting up your stall starts before dawn. You gather whatever your household has to spare. Fresh eggs, limp carrots, a suspiciously lumpy wheel of cheese, and maybe a few bundles of dried herbs. If you're lucky, you get first pick from yesterday's bread and a basket of withered apples. There's no fancy signage or advertising, just your loudest voice and a spot staked out between Agnes the fishwife and that one man who always smells like fermented onions. The market is chaos. It's a cacophony of shouting vendors, squabbling chickens, and children darting underfoot. Haggling is expected. Every customer believes themselves a master negotiator, ready to argue over the price of a turnip as if it's a royal inheritance. Your opening price is always a few coins higher than you hope to get, because everyone, including your cousins, will try to whittle you down. If you hold your ground, you might even sell that bread crust for more than it's worth, earning yourself a round of applause from the other stallholders, or at least a grunt of respect. Running a stall isn't just about the goods, it's about relationships. You learn quickly who pays in coin, who pays in gossip, and who will try to trade you a pair of half-worn shoes for your best onion. You swap news and rumors, keeping your ears open for anything useful, who has extra firewood, whose cow is sick, who might need a midwife soon. The market is the medieval woman's version of LinkedIn, but with more mud and less subtlety. Competition is fierce. The baker's wife guards her spot like a hawk. The butcher's daughters glare at anyone who steps too close. And the old woman selling pies is a master of passive-aggressive side-eye. You form alliances, sometimes with your rivals, sharing space or combining your leftovers to make one decent stew at the end of the day. If you're sharp, you might pick up a new recipe, a handful of seeds, or a whispered warning about a tax collector making the rounds. Security is mostly DIY. Watch your baskets, keep one hand on your purse, and never turn your back on a group of small boys with empty pockets and sticky fingers. If something goes missing, you call out the thief, loudly and dramatically, knowing the entire market will stop to watch. Sometimes you recover your goods. Sometimes you just get a good story to retell at the well. By noon, you're exhausted but satisfied. If you sold enough, you bring home coins, maybe a treat for the children, a bit of honeycomb, a new comb, or a ribbon if you're feeling extravagant. If not, at least you've managed to barter for what your family needs. Either way, you've faced the world and held your own. In the grand scheme of medieval society, your stall may be small, your profits thin, and your market day muddy. But you're a girl boss by any measure. You keep the family afloat, the village connected, and yourself, at least for now, one step ahead of the chaos. In a world where power is measured by land and legacy, the woman who can out-haggle a merchant and still make it home with dinner is a legend in her own right. If you think modern babysitting is a challenge, try wrangling a brood of medieval children, yours. your sister-in-laws, and any neighborhood urchin who wanders into your yard looking for bread or excitement. Childcare, in the Middle Ages, is not so much a profession as it is a survival sport. There are no nannies, no daycare centers, and absolutely no parenting books, just the village, your wits, and a prayer that everyone will make it to supper in one piece. The average medieval household is bursting at the seams with children of all ages. Babies are strapped to backs or hips with strips of linen while you work, nurse, and direct the older ones with a mixture of threats and promises. Toddlers are everywhere, like small, sticky tornadoes, pulling on animals' tails, sampling mud, and testing the structural limits of every fence and bench. If you don't know where a child is, check the well, the fire, or the nearest pile of goat droppings. Older children, by age 5 or 6, are pressed into service. Child labor laws? Not invented yet. Little hands are expected to haul water, gather eggs, fetch firewood, and chase chickens out of the vegetable patch. The lucky ones get jobs indoors, spinning, mending, or pretending to help with supper, all while soaking up gossip from the grown-ups. Playtime is rare and usually multitasked with work. A foot race while delivering a message, or a game of tag with the pigs. Child safety is optimistic. There are no gates around the hearth, no warning labels, and definitely no helmets. A scraped knee or a goose bite is just part of growing up. Serious accidents are, unfortunately, all too common, but resilience is baked into the daily routine. If you can dodge the geese and survive a tumble from the apple tree, you're practically an adult already. Discipline is a communal affair. Any adult can scold, threaten, or, if things get really wild, grab a switch. The goal is to produce children who are useful, obedient, and, ideally, quiet. If a child mouths off, the entire household hears about it. If one excels, the news is shared just as quickly, often with much pride and a hopeful glance toward future dowries or apprenticeships. Entertaining children is a creative pursuit. Toys are rare and mostly homemade. Rag dolls, carved animals, and the occasional hand-me-down spinning top. Games involve rocks, sticks, and a liberal approach to the rules. Storytelling is the original bedtime routine, fairy tales, cautionary legends, and real-life disasters told in vivid detail to keep the little ones in line. "Don't go near the woods or the wolves will get you" is both a warning and a guarantee of an early bedtime. Feeding this crowd is its own trial. Meals are noisy, chaotic, and rarely enough to fill everyone's stomach. Children eat last and fastest, learning to protect their share with sharp elbows and quick hands. Picky eaters aren't an option. If you don't eat your pottage, someone else will. Still, despite the chaos and constant risk, there's a kind of joy in this messy herd. Siblings become lifelong allies, and cousins are your first best friends. Laughter is loud, and the affection, though rarely spoken aloud, is fierce. Every milestone, from first steps to first lost tooth, is celebrated with as much fanfare as the household can muster. Childcare in the Middle Ages is never easy, rarely peaceful, but always memorable. If you can keep track of everyone until bedtime, soothe the worst bumps, and tell a story that chases off nightmares, you're not just surviving, you're winning at the ultimate medieval game. Life in the Middle Ages is mostly routine, a relentless rotation of work, chores, and survival. But every so often, the village calendar offers a break from monotony. The feast day. On paper, these are times of communal joy, heaping tables, and merriment. In practice, they're a high-wire act of planning, preparation, and praying the weather behaves. And when the feast days are done, famine is always lurking in the shadows, ready to humble even the heartiest family. The build-up to any feast is part anticipation, part anxiety, Holy days, saints' days, harvest festivals, they're marked in everyone's mind as a brief chance to set aside hunger and routine. The excitement begins days in advance. Every household cleans, repairs, and scrubs like the bishop is coming for dinner. Your hands are raw from beating the dust out of blankets and the shame out of the family's reputation. Food is the centerpiece, and the whole village mobilizes. The best hens are eyed with suspicion. Pigs go missing temporarily, and everyone guards their eggs like tiny gold coins. If your family is lucky, you might be able to barter for a joint of meat, a crock of honey, or a precious handful of dried fruit. The children are electric with anticipation, watching for signs of extra bread or the telltale smell of something roasting over a real fire. On the big day, you wake early, earlier than usual, if such a thing is possible. You bake, stew, roast, and invent new ways to stretch thin ingredients. The kitchen is a whirlwind of flour, laughter, and the occasional sharp word when someone burns the porridge or knocks over the ale. Dishes are borrowed, knives are shared, and at least one cousin tries to sneak a taste of everything for quality control. If the bread rises, the day is blessed. If it doesn't, you blame the weather, the yeast, and maybe Agnes from 2 houses down, just to be safe. The feast itself is a rare spectacle. The best dishes are piled high in the center: roasted meat, pies, stews, thick with whatever could be spared. Everyone gathers: neighbors, distant relatives, even the wandering peddler if he promises not to eat too much. There's singing, stories, and a sense that, for just one evening, everyone is full. Laughter mingles with the smoke from the hearth, and even the village grump allows a smile. But behind the joy is a sober knowledge. Feast days are brief, and famine is a familiar guest. The celebrations are followed by lean times, when every crumb is precious and even turnips look appetizing. Leftovers, if any, are carefully rationed. Dried beans and salted vegetables make up the meals, and hunger becomes a constant companion. Mothers stretch pottage with water, tell stories to distract hungry children, and pray for the return of spring. The community supports each other as best they can. Food is shared, sometimes out of generosity, sometimes out of necessity. The church doles out charity when possible, but everyone knows that next year's feast depends on this year's luck and labor. Every family remembers the hungry years, the winters when cupboards were bare and hope was measured in mouthfuls. Still, the feast day memories sustain you. In the darkest weeks, the promise of the next festival keeps spirits alive. Children retell stories of past feasts. Adults plan for better days. And everyone looks for small reasons to celebrate. Because in a world balanced between bounty and want, the memory of a shared meal, a song, or a single perfect loaf of bread is what makes the hard times bearable and what keeps hope alive until the next bell rings. If you think your neighborhood group chat gets spicy, you haven't experienced the medieval village rumor mill. Reputation is everything. The local gossip grapevine is faster than any horse, more persistent than a head cold, and absolutely impossible to leave. For a medieval woman, your good name is your best, and sometimes only, asset, so guard it like your last loaf of bread. Gossip is a form of currency, traded at the well, beside the hearth, and under the guise of helping out with the laundry. News spreads not just from mouth to ear, but from door to door, crossing fences and rivers, gathering flourishes and embellishments along the way. A chicken goes missing in the morning, and by lunchtime, half the village has opinions, suspects, and a running theory involving Agnes and the miller's apprentice. Reputation starts in the home but never stays there. Everything you do is observed, discussed, and catalogued for future reference. If your stew is bland, people notice. If your baby cries too much, someone wonders aloud if you're feeding it enough. If you dare to wear a new scarf, Be prepared for speculation. Where did she get it, and what or who did she trade? Your every move, smile, and sigh is public property, analyzed and interpreted with more detail than a royal proclamation. The church and the marketplace are the main hubs of information exchange. On Sundays, women exchange sidelong glances and whispered comments between prayers. At the market, the real transactions happen not over turnips, but over tales. Who's feuding with whom? Who's fallen ill? Who hasn't shown up to Mass in 3 weeks? If you miss a holy day or snap at your husband in public, the news will reach your mother before you do. For medieval women, gossip is a double-edged sword. It can protect you or cut you down. Being in the know gives you power. A sharp word here, a comforting arm there, and you're a minor celebrity for the afternoon. But stray too far from the norm, and you risk becoming the villain in the village's latest cautionary tale. She talks too much, she's too clever, or she's got ideas. All are dangerous reputations to cultivate. Woe to the woman who is too outspoken or too silent, too generous or too thrifty. Even your silences speak volumes. Reputational damage is hard to undo. If you're the target of a particularly juicy story, you'll find yourself under extra scrutiny at the well, at Mass, and even in your own kitchen. Denial only adds fuel to the fire. A clever joke might buy you some goodwill, but mostly, you wait for the next scandal to come along and draw the spotlight away. Sometimes, the only thing to do is keep your head down, your smile ready, and your alibi rock solid. Gossip can be useful too. It's how you hear about upcoming feast days, which neighbor has a surplus of eggs, or whose goat is about to give birth. Friendships are forged and broken over a well-timed tidbit. For the shrewd, a little information goes a long way. Just be careful what you share and with whom. Despite the risks, gossip brings the village together. It's a survival tool, an entertainment source, and, sometimes, a way to check in on each other. In a world with no newspapers, telephones, or privacy, the group chat never really closes. So you mind your words, tend your reputation, and remember, in the medieval village, everyone knows your name, your business, and whether or not you burned the pottage again. And when the next story starts to swirl, you just hope it's not about you. To be a widow in medieval Europe is to walk a very fine line, half feared, half pitied, and always noticed. If you survive long enough for your husband to shuffle off this mortal coil, by fever, farm accident, or the unfortunate business end of a goose, you suddenly become one of the village's most complicated figures. Welcome to the strange, double-edged world of widowhood. First, the grief. You're expected to mourn, to wear your sorrow as publicly as your oldest, drabbest dress. There's a set period for wailing and looking miserable. Too short, and people whisper. Too long, and they start whispering anyway. Some neighbors offer casseroles and condolences, others offer sideways glances and speculation about how you'll manage on your own. Everyone wonders, will you remarry, retreat, or reveal some secret strength? Your legal status, for once, becomes interesting. As a widow, you might, just might, have some say in your own affairs. If you're lucky, your husband left you land, a house, or at least a goat. For a brief, shining moment, you get to make decisions, sign documents, and collect rents. You're independent, which in medieval society is both admirable and terrifying. The menfolk are suddenly unsure what to do with you. And the women, well, they're watching closely to see if you mess it all up or become a quiet legend. But freedom has its downsides. If you smile too soon, you're cold-hearted. If you manage your property well, you're suspicious. If you take in a stray cat, you're eccentric, possibly magical. Widows are often accused of witchcraft, especially if the weather turns bad, the cow stops giving milk, or a neighbor's bread refuses to rise. You're an easy scapegoat, not tied to a man, not under anyone's thumb, and, let's be honest, possibly too clever for your own good. Widowhood is also a test of alliances. Your in-laws may want the house back. Your own family might expect you to return, with or without the goat. And the village bachelors line up. Some genuinely hopeful, others more interested in your dowry. Every proposal comes with baggage. Children from previous marriages, debts, or inconvenient personalities. If you say yes, you start over. If you say no, you risk becoming the strange old woman who lives alone at the edge of town. Still, there are perks. You gain a certain immunity from the constant grind of obedience. No one tells you what time to go to bed or how much salt to use in the pottage. You get the best seat by the fire and the last word in every argument. You become the village's unofficial counselor, gossip repository, and, when needed, the stern voice that settles disputes. If you can read and write, you might even be asked to draft letters or keep accounts. Skills previously reserved for men and the occasional nun. And, of course, there's the quiet satisfaction of outliving a world that never quite knew what to make of you. You watch generations come and go, children grow up, and the village change in ways both tiny and enormous. You become a legend in your own right. The widow who survived, thrived, and never lost her wit or her goat. In the end, widowhood is what you make of it, a curse, a challenge, or an unexpected reward. You live on your own terms, if only for a little while, and teach the next generation that sometimes the most powerful position in the village belongs to the woman with nothing left to lose. So, you made it through your first, and probably last, day as a medieval woman. You survived the morning bucket, the afternoon pottage, a livestock incident or two, childbirth with 0 painkillers, and somehow managed not to be accused of witchcraft just for knowing how to make soup taste slightly less like despair. Take a second to appreciate just how much effort went into not dying. Every hour was an obstacle course. Dodge a draft, haul some water, survive another round of medieval medicine, and try not to annoy anyone with more social power or sharper pitchforks. You juggled work, motherhood, rumors, and the kind of hygiene routine that would terrify a modern spa. And if you managed to steal a moment of peace, maybe while spinning wool or sharing gossip at the well, that was your version of me time. Let's give a little nod to the women of the past, whose names are mostly forgotten, but whose grit, stubbornness, and creative problem-solving shaped the world we're lucky enough to lounge around in today. They endured lives that were short, loud, and usually pretty itchy, but they also built families, communities, and legacies that outlasted even the most fashionable lice. So tonight, as you settle into your soft, clean bed with hot water on tap, electric light at your fingertips, and exactly 0 livestock in your living room, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to the generations of women who survived long enough to invent, demand, and eventually enjoy all these modern comforts. Because history, as grim and gross as it sometimes was, is proof that people, especially women, are endlessly stubborn, creative, and a little bit ridiculous. May your dreams be free of turnips, plagues, and cold soup. Sleep well, and remember, if you ever feel underappreciated, just imagine explaining dry shampoo to a medieval peasant. Good night.